Welcome back to our channel, where we delve into the complex and ever-evolving plot of Genoa. Victor's ruthless plan is about to be exposed as he attempts to send Matt to a psychiatric institution to cover up his criminal secrets. Matt will encounter Patty next week, which suggests he will be confined to the same maximum security psychiatric facility as her. Let's unravel the latest shocking developments together. The intoxicating illusion of absolute freedom is a dangerous narcotic, and Matt Clark recently drank deeply from that poisoned chalice. When the electronic tether was severed from his ankle, a profound arrogance washed over him, blinding him to the catastrophic reality of his actions. He had dared to look the undisputed patriarch of Genoa City in the eye and break a binding covenant. In the arms of Phyllis Summers, surrounded by the opulent luxury of the Genoa City Athletic Club, Matt believed he had successfully outmaneuvered the billionaire. He basked in the false glory of his perceived liberation, convinced that he had finally shed the oppressive weight of the Newman Empire. This fleeting euphoria, however, was nothing more than the agonizingly slow ascent of a roller coaster before a devastating vertical drop into the abyss. Matt's hubris had convinced him that Victor Newman's ultimatums were mere posturing, a fatal miscalculation that would soon cost him every ounce of autonomy he possessed. Victor Newman does not make idle threats. He issues prophecies of doom for those who dare to cross him. The moment Matt Clark shattered their clandestine agreement, the invisible, omnipotent machinery of Newman Enterprises was set into motion. Victor had explicitly warned Matt that defiance would result in immediate and severe incarceration. Yet Matt's arrogance led him to believe he could operate outside the patriarch's jurisdiction. Victor's retaliation was not a loud public spectacle, but a silent, surgical strike executed in the shadows. The billionaire did not merely seek to punish Matt, he sought to entirely erase him from the board, neutralizing the threat with terrifying efficiency. The realization of Victor's boundless power crashed down upon Matt only when it was far too late, proving once again that in Genoa City, the House of Newman always collects its debts, extracting payment in the currency of human suffering and absolute subjugation. The transition from the intoxicating freedom of the outside world to the suffocating reality of captivity was a brutal psychological shock for Matt. He was not dragged into a conventional prison cell with iron bars and a predictable hierarchy. Instead, Victor orchestrated a far more insidious form of imprisonment. Matt found himself thrust into the sterile, labyrinthine corridors of a maximum security psychiatric facility. This was a calculated move by Victor, designed to strip Matt not only of his physical liberty, but of his fundamental credibility. By placing him in an asylum, Victor effectively labeled Matt as a deranged lunatic, ensuring that any future claims or accusations he might make against the Newman family would be dismissed as the ravings of a madman. The cold, clinical environment of the ward served as a terrifying testament to Victor's ability to manipulate the very fabric of reality to suit his ruthless agendas. Within the oppressive walls of the psychiatric facility, the sensory deprivation began to gnaw at the edges of Matt's sanity. The relentless hum of fluorescent lights, the heavily medicated shuffling of the inmates, and the impenetrable reinforced doors created a purgatory of white noise and isolation. Every second spent in this sterile cage was a grueling reminder of his colossal failure. The facility was designed to break the human spirit, utilizing a combination of chemical restraints and psychological isolation to reduce its inhabitants to compliant shadows. For a man like Matt, who thrived on manipulation, control, and the thrill of the psychological hunt, being reduced to a mere patient number was an agonizing form of torture. The realization that he was entirely at the mercy of apathetic orderlies and heavily guarded perimeters sent waves of suffocating panic crashing through his chest. As the endless hours bled into days, a crushing tide of regret threatened to drown Matt in his sterile cell. The memory of the electronic ankle monitor, once a symbol of Victor's oppressive control, now seemed like a minor inconvenience compared to the absolute sensory and physical deprivation of the psych ward. Matt found himself agonizing over the broken agreement, mentally replaying the moments where he chose defiance over compliance. He had been tasked with manipulating Kane Ashby, a complex but manageable assignment that would have kept him in Victor's tentative good graces. Now, the bitter taste of hindsight poisoned his every waking thought. He realized that enduring the humiliating leash of the Newman patriarch would have been infinitely preferable to rotting in a forgotten wing of a mental institution, completely severed from the world he had fought so desperately to conquer. The agonizing regret also brought the agonizing death of Matt's fragile, newly constructed redemption arc. For weeks, he had painstakingly curated a facade of reform, desperately trying to convince Sienna Bacall and Phyllis Summers that he was a changed man, capable of leaving his monstrous past behind. He had almost begun to believe his own lies, seduced by the possibility of a normal life and genuine human connection. However, the brutal reality of his incarceration acted as a corrosive acid, stripping away the veneer of the reformed citizen to reveal the dark, unyielding core beneath. The realization that his attempts at redemption had ultimately led him to a maximum security asylum shattered his desire to be better. The world had treated him like a monster, and in the suffocating silence of his cell, Matt began to accept that monstrous identity once more. The sterile environment of the psychiatric facility, rather than curing his psychological afflictions, served as a dark incubator for his dormant sociopathy. Stripped of his freedom, his dignity, and his carefully crafted public persona, Matt had nothing left but his innate, dangerous nature. The cold calculation, the manipulative charm, and the underlying current of malevolence began to claw their way back to the surface of his psyche. He was no longer the apologetic man seeking forgiveness from Sharon or Sienna. He was a caged predator, methodically analyzing his surroundings, searching for weaknesses in the system, and plotting his inevitable revenge. The facility had unwittingly provided the perfect conditions for the resurrection of the true Matt Clark, a man who viewed empathy as a weakness and chaos as a weapon. Yet, Matt was not the only apex predator prowling the heavily monitored corridors of this institutional purgatory. The maximum security wing housed some of the most fractured and dangerous minds in the region, individuals whose grip on reality had entirely shattered. Among these forgotten souls resided a woman whose name was synonymous with tragedy, obsession, and sudden, catastrophic violence. Patty Williams's presence in the facility was a testament to a lifetime of profound mental illness and horrific manipulation. She had been exiled to this clinical fortress to await trial, a broken pawn recently utilized by the disgraced Dr. Lawrence Markham to inflict near-fatal trauma upon Jack Abbott. Patty was a walking ghost, a tragic figure whose fractured psyche harbored a terrifying capacity for destruction. Patty Williams represented a unique and unpredictable variable within the rigid structure of the psych ward. Her history was a tapestry of delusion and bloodshed, driven by a deeply rooted, pathological obsession with the Abbott family. She was not a calculating mastermind like Matt. Rather, she was a force of pure, unadulterated chaos, capable of oscillating between childlike innocence and homicidal rage in the blink of an eye. The facility staff treated her with a mixture of pity and extreme caution, knowing that beneath her vacant stares and disjointed mutterings lay a dormant volcano of violence. Patty's mind was a labyrinth of shattered memories and fabricated realities, making her entirely immune to conventional reason or logic. She was a tragic victim of her own mind, yet undeniably one of the most dangerous individuals in Genoa City. The inevitable collision between these two dark forces occurred on the 28th of August, a date that would quietly mark a terrifying shift in the psychological landscape of the facility. The heavily guarded recreation room, a bleak expanse of bolted-down furniture and shatterproof glass, served as the stage for this fateful encounter. Matt, pacing the perimeter with the restless energy of a caged wolf, suddenly found his attention captivated by a solitary figure sitting in the corner. The air in the room seemed to grow heavy, charged with an invisible, crackling tension as Matt's calculating gaze locked onto Patty Williams. It was a moment of profound, silent recognition, a chilling intersection of two individuals who had left trails of devastation in their respective wakes. There was no dramatic confrontation, no exchange of threats or pleasantries. There was only the intense, psychological appraisal between two outcasts. Matt observed the subtle twitches of Patty's hands, the distant, haunted look in her eyes, and the underlying current of lethal unpredictability that radiated from her fragile frame. He recognized the profound depth of her mental fracture, but more importantly, he recognized the raw, untapped power of her madness. Patty, in turn, seemed to sense the dark aura surrounding Matt. Her usually vacant gaze sharpened for a fraction of a second, acknowledging the presence of a kindred spirit, another soul who had been deemed too dangerous for the outside world. It was a silent communion of monsters, an unspoken understanding forged in the crucible of their shared captivity. The implications of Matt Clark and Patty Williams occupying the same restricted space were nothing short of catastrophic. Matt possessed the cold, sociopathic intellect required to orchestrate complex manipulations, while Patty possessed the unpredictable, explosive violence necessary to execute them. If Matt's resurgent dark nature decided to weaponize Patty's fractured psyche, the resulting synergy could tear down the very walls of the institution. Patty had always been a harbinger of doom. History dictated that whenever she was involved in a narrative, tragedy inevitably followed. Her presence was a catalyst for chaos, a lit match dancing dangerously close to a powder keg. Matt, desperate for leverage, and consumed by a renewed thirst for vengeance, was precisely the type of man who would not hesitate to strike that match. As the heavy steel doors of the recreation room slammed shut, echoing through the sterile corridors, a chilling realization settled over the facility. Victor Newman, in his ruthless pursuit of absolute control, had sought to neutralize Matt Clark by burying him in an asylum. However, by placing a master manipulator in the exact same cage as a highly volatile homicidal wildcard, the Newman patriarch may have inadvertently orchestrated his own worst nightmare. The regret that had previously consumed Matt evaporated, replaced by a cold, terrifying sense of purpose. As Matt continued to watch Patty from across the room, a sinister smile slowly crept across his face, signaling the birth of a dark, unholy alliance. What unimaginable horrors will this terrifying combination of calculating sociopathy and unpredictable madness unleash upon the unsuspecting residents of Genoa City when they inevitably find a way out?